Good morning. I'm going to read you a story called Mr. Mell Goes to Camp, and the author is Betty Porter. There are three main characters in our story. Mr. Benson, he's a music teacher at a summer camp. The second character is Mr. Mell. He's the cello that's below here. A cello is a stringed instrument. It has 4 strings, and as you can see right here, this is called the bow, and that's how you play the cello, with a bow. It's kind of like a violin, but it's a little bigger. So that's Mr. Mell. And then Sam is our third character, and Sam is Mr. Benson's music student. So what I want you to listen for today in this story is for what problem Sam has. And then I want you to listen, how does Sam solve the problem? That's our solution. Mr. Mell goes to camp. One summer, Mr. Benson and his cello, Mr. Mell, took a vacation from the orchestra they played in. They went to Camp Crescendo to teach music. Mr. Mell couldn't stand summer camp. His strings ached from the damp breezes blowing off the lake. The crickets chirped so loudly he couldn't hear himself play. Worst of all was Mr. Benson's student Sam. Mr. Mell shivered at the squawks and screeches that came from Sam's cello. One afternoon, Mr. Benson and Mr. Mell were on their way to the practice cabin when they saw Sam and a friend take a canoe out on the lake. Watching Sam skim over the water and out of sight, Mr. Mell thought that Sam was much better at paddling a canoe than playing a cello. At 3 o'clock, it was nearly time for Sam's lesson. "Let's go practice by the lake," suggested Mr. Benson. "We'll watch for Sam, and he can have his lesson outside." Mr. Mell worried about getting sand in his strings, but he could tell that Mr. Benson liked the idea of an outdoor lesson. Mr. Benson and Mr. Mell sat under the picnic shelter at the lake. The water lapping against the boat dock seemed to keep time to their music. Suddenly, dark clouds rolled over the sun. "I'm afraid a storm is blowing up," said Mr. Benson anxiously, playing a little faster. "Hope Sam gets back soon." Mr. Mell could tell that Mr. Benson didn't have his mind on his playing, so he played louder to remind Mr. Benson to concentrate on the music. The clouds began to look more threatening. Lightning flashed, lighting up the lake. Thunder boomed. "Oh dear," wailed Mr. Benson, playing even louder and faster. "I wish Sam would hurry. A bad storm is coming." Mr. Mell wished Mr. Benson would take him back to the practice cabin before the rain warped his sides. Just then, a boat appeared in the distance. It quickly grew bigger and bigger as it approached the dock. "They're back!" cried Mr. Benson, playing a happy run on Mr. Mell's strings. Just as the rain began to pour, Sam and his friend jumped from the canoe. Sam ran to join Mr. Benson and Mr. Mell under the shelter. "I thought we'd never get here," cried Sam, panting and puffing. "We headed for the shore as soon as we saw the storm clouds, but I couldn't tell where the camp was. Then I heard Mr. Mell's music over the noise of the storm, and I followed it home." Mr. Benson beamed happily and patted Mr. Mell's strings. The last night at Camp Crescendo, Sam said goodbye. He shook Mr. Benson's hand and strummed Mr. Mell's strings. "Next summer, I'll practice until I can make my cello sound like you, Mr. Mell," said Sam. "And I won't get lost on the lake again. Thank you for helping me find my way back." Mr. Mell was happy that Sam was going to practice, and he was even happier that camp was over and he was going home. So did you listen for the problem in the story? What problem does Sam have on the lake? Yes, he's in a canoe on the lake and a storm is coming. That is a problem, isn't it? So how does Sam find his way back to the camp? What's his solution? Yes, Mr. Benson plays Mr. Mell louder, and then Sam heard it and he followed the sound of the music back to camp. So then how does Mr. Mell help make Sam want to become a better cello player? Yes, Sam wants to learn how to make his cello sound like Mr. Mell, and remember, he said that he was going to practice more. That's the end of our story today. Hope you have a good day. Bye.